Today, we're diving into how post-colonial theories are completely turning our understanding of global security on its head. Seriously, this is a perspective that challenges the very foundations of how we think about safety and power. It asks us to see the world not from the usual centers of power, but through the eyes of the vast majority of humanity. Okay, so here's the game plan for how we're going to unpack all this. First, we're going to shine a light on security's big Eurocentric blind spot. Then, we'll get into something called Subaltern realism, one of the first big challenges to that old way of thinking. After that, we'll dig into why even that theory got some serious pushback, which leads us right into the really radical post-colonial turn. And finally, we'll pull it all together and see what it means to decolonize security right now, today. So, let's kick things off with this idea of a Eurocentric blind spot. What does that even mean? Well, the core of it is this. For most of its history, the whole way we've studied global security was, frankly, a Western project. It was built by the West, using Western experiences, to solve what the West saw as its problems. Think of it this way. It's kind of like trying to understand the entire vast ocean by only ever studying one single bay. It just sounds ridiculous, right? But for decades, that's exactly what security studies did. It took the very specific history of Europe and North America and just assumed it was the universal story for everyone. And this narrow focus created a massive, massive blind spot. Look at this map. This whole area, what used to be called the Third World, that's most of the world's people right there. And yet the so-called experts were almost totally obsessed with the Cold War rivalry between the First World, the West, and the Second World, the Communist bloc. The security of everyone else? Well, it was either ignored completely or only mattered if it affected the two superpowers. The scholar Mohammed Ayoob just nailed this. He said these nations were treated as mere objects rather than subjects. Think about that. They weren't seen as the main characters in their own stories, with their own needs and histories. Nope. They were just pawns, pieces on a global chessboard for the US and the Soviet Union to move around. Now, you can imagine this massive gap in understanding didn't go unnoticed. It sparked a major intellectual fightback, coming from the so-called Third World itself. And that brings us to Subaltern realism, a really pioneering attempt to build a security theory from the ground up, one based on what post-colonial states were actually going through. So what is Subaltern realism? At its core, it's a theory that just screams, you can't use a one-size-fits-all model. It argues that the security problems in the global south are so fundamentally different, so unique, that you need a completely separate toolkit to understand them. A framework built for the subaltern, the states lower down on the global power ladder. And the difference is just night and day. On one hand, you have traditional Western security, which is obsessed with external threats, other countries invading, that sort of thing. But for so many post-colonial states, the biggest dangers are internal. We're talking civil wars, unstable governments, questions about who's even in charge. And crucially, those internal problems and external threats get tangled up in this incredibly messy, complicated web of insecurity. Ayoob saw this as a special kind of trap, a unique security predicament with three main parts. First, there's the state-making challenge. These new countries had to build stable governments almost overnight, often with totally illogical borders drawn by their old colonial rulers. Second, that internal weakness often spills out and causes regional conflicts. And third, they're stuck in this subordinate position in the world, a direct hangover from colonialism that leaves them weak and economically dependent. But, as groundbreaking as Ayoub's work was, the story doesn't end there. And this brings us to a really critical moment where people started to poke holes in his theory, asking a very pointed question. Is the state really the thing we should be trying to secure? So here's the crucial pivot. For Ayoob, the answer was a stronger state. More power to the state meant more security. Simple, right? But then, a really uncomfortable question started bubbling to the surface. What if the state isn't the solution? What if the state itself is the biggest threat to its own people? And the criticisms came in hot and fast. People started saying, look, this theory mixes up the security of the government with the security of the actual people. And that's dangerous because it could be used to justify a regime cracking down on its own citizens. Plus, the theory had some other issues. Lumping a huge, diverse group of nations under one label like Third World was just too simple. And using the term subaltern to talk about states, some of which are quite powerful, kind of misses the whole point of the word, which is supposed to be about oppressed people. And that very question, the state as a threat, blew the doors wide open for something even more radical. This is what we call the post-colonial turn. And this wasn't just about tweaking a theory. It was about tearing down the whole way the West produces knowledge about the rest of the world and exposing these really deep issues of power, knowledge, and, yes, race. To get this, we have to talk about a game-changing idea called Orientalism from the brilliant scholar Edward Said. Now, this isn't just about pretty paintings of the East. Said argued that for centuries, the West basically invented an idea of the Orient as this mystical, irrational, and fundamentally inferior place. And this wasn't just a cultural observation. It was a powerful system of knowledge that was used to make the West feel superior, rational, and modern, and to justify colonialism. The effect of this was profound. This process of othering basically casts anyone non-Western as a passive object, a side character without their own history or ability to act. In this worldview, the West is the only main character making history, while history just happens to everybody else. And that bias got baked right into the DNA of how we study security. And this control wasn't just about ideas, it was physical, it was hands-on. Postcolonial theory uses the term biopolitics to describe how colonial governments were obsessed with controlling and managing actual human bodies through things like forced labor, population counts, and hygiene campaigns. It was about the direct administration of life itself. But this power over life, well, it has a terrifying and much darker flip side. And this is where the thinker Akil Mbembe comes in with his incredibly powerful and chilling concept of necropolitics. He argues that the ultimate form of power isn't just managing life, it's necropower, the power to decide who gets to live and who is forced to die. This power creates what he calls death worlds, zones where people are subjected to so much violence and neglect that they exist in a state between life and death. They become, in his words, the living dead. Okay, so this brings us right up to today, connecting all these heavy ideas to the present moment. This is about decolonizing security. And this isn't just some abstract academic debate. It's a real call to action to challenge what's known as the coloniality of power, the idea that the structures of colonialism are still with us long after the colonies gained independence. So what's the end game here? What does decolonizing actually mean? Well, first, it's about exposing how those old colonial hierarchies based on race and knowledge are still kicking around today. Second, it means challenging what's called methodological whiteness, this default assumption that Western ideas are the universal standard for everyone. And finally, the goal is to make space for a pluriverse, not a single one-size-fits-all universe, but a world where many different views and experiences of what it even means to be secure are all seen as valid. And that leaves us with the big challenge, a question not just for academics, but for every single one of us trying to make sense of our complicated world. In what ways do these old colonial ways of thinking still color how we see global threats and their solutions? Really thinking about that helps us start to see the hidden power structures that continue to decide who in our world gets to be secure and who doesn't.